guys, it's Anna from Bright Lane Gardens, and today I wanted to talk to you about how you can sustainably harvest your herbs to ensure that the plant will continue growing after you harvest. When I first started out growing herbs, I would always buy those little grocery store guys about this size. I would come home, harvest it a couple times, and within a month the plant would be completely dead. I couldn't figure out what on earth I was doing wrong, but of course now I know better. I wasn't harvesting sustainably, and I really wasn't taking that great of care of the plant. So today we're going to talk about how I create healthy, diverse herb gardens, and most of all, how I keep them producing throughout the season. Just for reference, we are in northern Michigan. All of my herb gardens are in containers because we have some really friendly visitors up here, from rabbits to deer to critters, and they just love to eat my herb gardens. So I started keeping them up on my deck, and I've had significantly more success reserving the herbs just for my family to eat. So that's already been a big win. But I also want to talk to you about how I get my dill looking this bushy from a teeny tiny plant, and how I make sure that all of my plants can continue to produce long after I've started harvesting from them. We're going to start talking about a couple different varieties. Now, these are just our most popular herbs that we sell here at the nursery. There are, of course, many more herbs than just the ones I have here. But just for the sake of time, we're just going to talk about these varieties that I have here. So a quick introduction, I have cilantro, purple basil. This tastes the same exact as green basil, it's just a different color. One of the top reasons I actually really like this one is it does seem to be pretty insect resistant. I think they don't really care for the purple flowers as much. One downside though is it does seem to really attract the heat from the sun, so I've noticed that these guys will dry out to a crisp a little bit quicker than my green basil will. But taste profile wise, purple basil is the exact same as the green basil. This right here is a lemon thyme. If you haven't had this variety of thyme before, it's so fun, especially for chicken recipes. I love it. It really truly does have a lemon essence to it. One of my favorite herbs that we have here. Over here we have a pineapple mint, which if you're a mojito fan like I am, this is a really good option for mojitos. I of course have my classic dill curly parsley. It tastes the same as flathead parsley. I just like it because it adds a decorative texture. And then over on the far left here, I do have a trailing rosemary. It's just slightly different from your traditional upright arp rosemary. I only chose it because I wanted it to droop off the edge of my container here. It has just started to really droop over, which I love. These guys here I pulled off the nursery floor. They don't love being in these tiny containers, and we've had about a week's worth of 90-degree weather, so they're a little worse for wear, but they are healthy enough to still harvest from today, and I just wanted to use them as an example of how we harvest these types of herbs. So starting with our upright flowering variety of herbs, which I have the purple basil and the cilantro. And what I mean by that is they're gonna grow with one main stem straight up the middle, a few branches on the outside, and it won't take too long before they start to flower at the top. Now, you may or may not have experienced this already, but if your basil starts to flower, you really want to chop that flower off. That is when the plant starts to go downhill, so you want to make sure that you're pruning that back before it starts to happen. This guy has not yet started to flower, but I can tell that he's got a little bud forming right in the middle there, so I do want to make sure I'm pruning him back today. You're going to harvest cilantro and basil in a very similar fashion. A lot of people use their thumbnails. I much prefer to use my clean pair of snips. Just like any plant, these guys can get infected, so make sure that you're giving your snips at least a quick wipe down, if not an alcohol wipe, just to ensure that the plant isn't introduced to any bacteria. So starting with my cilantro here, I'm going to want to cut down this primary stem at the top, and I really want to cut him right above a healthy looking branch. So I'm looking at this branch right here, and I'm going to want to make my snip directly above him. As we do with any of our snips, we want to do that on a 45-degree angle to make sure that the plant does not hold water on top of that stem cut. I've gone ahead and cut him. There's a couple other prunes that I'm going to make today simply because these branches aren't going to survive and I can still use them in a recipe. These outer branches here that you see kind of flailing over the side, those are going to get top heavy and they will bend and basically just break off pretty soon here. So I'm going to go ahead and snip those right off. It'll drive the nutrients back to the rest of the plant here, and I can go ahead and use those offshoots before they die instead of just letting them go to waste. He still isn't pretty, but he looks a little bit better than he did. He's so fragrant. I can already smell the cilantro. I personally love cilantro. My husband hates it. I think it's like a genetic gene I've read before, where cilantro, it's either so refreshing or it tastes like soap. If you have any ideas on that, leave them in the comments below, because this is a really common topic of conversation in our household. I love cilantro. I think it's great on a lot of Mexican dishes, and I even use it in a couple of my homemade cocktails. This guy here is our red Reuben basil. I always just call it purple basil. You've probably seen this at restaurants. It's very decorative. The growth pattern's the same, the flavor profile is the same, the smell is the same. The only difference is the color. I like him. I think he adds a little variety to my herb garden, so he's just kind of a fun tradition for me every year. Now this guy's getting really leggy, really gangly, so I'm gonna wanna go ahead and cut him way back. And I'm actually going to wanna do it directly above these leaf nodes here, because basically I really want these leaves down here to continue to produce. I'm gonna go ahead and make that snip at my 45-degree angle. And there you have it. There's not much left. He will continue to branch out. I'll try to post an update at the end of this video of what this guy looks like. In just a week, we should start to see a lot of new growth. Another fun thing on the purple basil is actually the new leaves, when they start to produce, are green and then they turn purple. So they're super cute when they're really young, and they add a lot of color variation to your planters. Next on my list here is my lemon thyme. Thyme is a very vigorous grower if you don't have any experience with this plant. The reason I'm laughing is we have a walk-through thyme in our backyard. The gal that lived here before us, she tried to create this beautiful little pathway. It is gorgeous, and she basically bordered it with thyme on either side. We have thyme everywhere now. It's in our lawn, it's in every single landscaped area that we have. It's truly everywhere on our property. So we walk through thyme all the time. Honestly, I don't hate it. It's not really invasive to our area here. It does bloom. We do get a lot of bees on it, and it smells lovely when you walk through it. So I really have no complaints. That's just my forewarning. If you're going to put thyme in the ground, just make sure you're aware. This is a prolific spreader. We're in northern Michigan here. It seems to love it up here. So if you're in a region like ours, just be aware of that before you plant it. Because thyme is such a good spreader, there's really not a lot of precaution you need to take when you're harvesting. This one I usually do just use my thumb and pinch off whatever branches I need, and I just leave the rest of the plant to grow. Now, if you were to go ahead and need a lot of thyme at once, you really could just snip down about 2 inches above the soil line, and all of this would grow back even bushier than before. So it really doesn't affect the plant overall. I have my mints on this side here. This is my pineapple mint, and this is very similar to the thyme in the sense that you can really prune it in a multitude of different ways without really harming the plant. Usually when you're using mint, it's a very potent and powerful herb, so you probably don't need much at once. If you're just wanting to grab a couple leaves, again, use your thumb and pinch off what you need. And from there, the plant will actually reproduce leaves from that spot, but it'll also encourage more growth down at the bottom too. If you do want a large amount of mint, or if you want to propagate it, which you can propagate mint from a cutting, you're going to go ahead and go in towards the bottom, again about 1 to 2 inches, cut directly above a leaf node, and you can take off an entire mint sprig. Mint's an excellent herb for drying. We frequently dry our mint. You can use it in a variety of different recipes. We again seem to use it in mojitos more than anything else, but mint is also a really effective mosquito repellent. So I actually add mint to a lot of my decorative planters. What a lot of people think is, oh, I have the plant on my deck so it'll repel mosquitoes. It will repel mosquitoes from that like 3-inch area, but in order for it to actually repel mosquitoes, what you really want to do is pluck off several leaves, crush them up with your fingers, and kind of set them where you are. You need to really encourage that aroma to come out in order for it to be an effective method of repelling the mosquitoes. It does smell amazing though. Next, I have my dill. I'm smiling ear to ear because I have had the worst experience growing dill throughout my years. This is probably the healthiest dill plant I've ever had, and I am so pleased by it because he was like just about dead when I started planting him. So anytime you're working with dill, you do want to start, dill and parsley are similar in the sense you want to start from the outside and work your way in. They can get a little top heavy, so I'm kind of looking for any fronds that look like they're flopped over a little bit or just not really staying within this vertical form here. I have one down here at the bottom. I'm going to cut them near the base while still leaving some foliage on. And I've got another one over here that I can do. And this is a really, really healthy plant. Dark green, a ton of growth, a ton of foliage. I'm very proud of this plant. Dill is a flowering plant, so you do want to keep an eye on the very tippy top of the primary stems of the plant. When you see those little buds start to form, that's when you want to jump in and make sure that you're pruning that down right away. Same thing as basil and cilantro. You definitely want to get that bud off before it starts to bloom, otherwise the quality of the plant will start to go downhill from there. Next I have my parsley. Parsley is very similar to dill in the sense that you're going to want to start from the outside and move your way in. So again, I'm looking for my floppy outliers here that really seem to stand out beyond the typical form of my plant here. I have a couple really healthy sprigs. This is a curly parsley. It is a little bit different. It's just kind of fun. It really does curl in on itself. Now the taste flavor profile is very, very similar to your flat leaf parsley. I just like it because it adds a little fun to whatever I'm cooking. Last but certainly not least, because it's one of my all-time favorite herbs, and that is rosemary. This is a creeping rosemary. This is my first experience with a creeping rosemary. I chose it so it could creep over the edge of the container, which it is successfully doing for me. But traditionally I've grown ARP rosemary, ARP, and that is your traditional upright rosemary. Here in Michigan, I've even gotten it to come back in subsequent years, which is amazing. Really hoping that this guy will come back for me too. When you are harvesting rosemary, you want to harvest the full sprig at one time instead of just taking off individual leaves. So I'm going to pick one of my healthier looking sprigs here. I'm gonna pick this guy. I don't want to harvest too much off of him just because I really want him to crawl over the container. But here's my little rosemary sprig, nice and tender, very fragrant. I can smell it already. One thing to note that when you are cooking or using these in a recipe, traditionally you'll take off that stem and you'll just use those tender green leaves. Rosemary is also another one that is so easy to dry and store for several years. So this is one of my favorite ones just to kind of dry out and keep for future use. These are some of the top herbs that we sell here in our store. There are, of course, a lot of herbs out there. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to harvesting herbs is not only should you have herbs so you can harvest them and use them in your kitchen, but harvesting herbs actually really, really benefits the plants. It's simply a form of pruning when it comes down to it. So understanding the correct way to harvest and prune a specific type of herb is really essential to keeping that herb going all summer long. If you're like me and you love to garden all year long, then garden in a planter like this so you can take it inside with you and keep the herbs going throughout the season. Growing herbs is an awesome way to get into gardening if you have little to no experience and just want to start experimenting with something. A lot of different types of herbs can be very forgiving, not to mention it's always fun to grow something that you can actually consume yourself. Next time you're at the grocery store, a farm market, or at a plant nursery, pick up a couple of herbs in a small planter like this and you'll be able to get started on your very own herb garden. If you have any questions for me or any experiences as you harvest your herbs, leave them in the comments below. If you enjoy watching content like this, please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out as a small business. And as always, thanks so much for tuning in with me today.